$1.6 trillion budget deficit. That means we're getting $1.6 trillion worth of government services that we're not paying for. Well, we got to pay for it. Who else is going to pay for it? Right? How are we paying for it? We're paying for it with higher gas prices. We're paying for it with higher food prices. The same thing as a tax. And so that's the trade-off. The government didn't take our money, they took our purchasing power. When they print money and spend it, somebody loses. Yes, whoever has money loses. Whoever's getting a paycheck loses because the value of that money is diminished because the new money that was created is spent into circulation by the government. Right? So if they raise taxes, then we have less money to buy products. If they create inflation, then we also have less money because prices go up. We have the same amount of money, but prices cost more. So we end up with less gas and less food because we ended up with more government instead. And I don't want government. I'd rather have the gas and the food. I got enough government. And so what we need, in fact, even today, Ben Bernanke admitted, he said in his Q&A, in his press conference, which was unprecedented, that, the reason he's having press conferences is that, he's trying to get some credibility. Of course, it backfired. I could have told him, the less he says, the better. Right? But he said in his speech that the deficits were the greatest threat to our future. Okay, well, he's the enabler. There'd be no deficits if it wasn't for Bernanke. If Bernanke raised interest rates, if Bernanke wasn't buying all those bonds, the government couldn't sell them. We're all talking about should we raise the debt ceiling. Well, none of that would be relevant if Ben Bernanke had some integrity. If he just said, I'm not going to buy the bonds. Doesn't matter what the debt ceiling is. They can't sell them. But the only reason that we have these huge deficits is because Ben Bernanke is playing the game. Ben Bernanke is the enabler. He is buying them up. He is monetizing. He's laying the government off the hook. The reason they don't have to make the hard choices is because Ben Bernanke gives them the easy way out. So how can we do that and then talk about what a great threat the deficits are? It's not the deficits that are a threat. It's Ben Bernanke. He's the threat.
You're talking about what's money creating. Isn't it really to support the banks? Isn't he working for the banks, and that's why he's doing it?
Well, yeah. Certainly the bankers are part of the beneficiaries of this process. A lot of bankers would have lost their jobs had the government not bailed them out. And that would have been a good thing. We got too many bankers. We can do with a few less. But yeah, and they're a powerful constituency. Look at all the people that work for government. Look at the people that work at the Fed. Look at the people that work at the White House. A lot of them came from Wall Street. They're all there to protect their buddies. And of course, they write big checks to Republicans and Democrats. So they know where their bread is buttered.
What percent of our portfolio should be in gold? And where do you see the price? What percent of our portfolio should be in gold? And
I don't know. There should certainly be some percent. I've said 5 to 10% is kind of like a minimal amount, and that's physical gold. And you might want to have, other gold investments, mining stocks, things like that. But a lot of it depends on the individual. How old they are, what their goals are. But not enough people have gold. And it was I just mentioned this. It was a recent story. And I guess it's relevant because this is a college audience, but the University of Texas, which has the second largest endowment next to Harvard, they put 5% of their endowment, which is $1 billion, into physical gold, bars that they're storing in a vault. And, I just got back from an institutional investor conference in Washington, in San Francisco. And it is hard to get an institution to do that. They never want to think outside the box. Because, first of all, you have these administrators, and none of it is their money. So they don't really care about the return. They just don't want to get fired. They don't want to do anything that could be considered, you put 5% in gold, and what if gold goes down? That was stupid. Why would you do something? They want to do what the conventional wisdom says you're supposed to do. So they cover their behind. If they lose money doing what everybody else does, it's like, well, look, I did what everybody else was doing. I couldn't have anticipated this. And that's their cover. But once you start to get the first person that puts 5% in gold, all of a sudden, it kind of validates it. Now, the next guy, it's a little bit, well, maybe we should have 5% of our endowment in gold. And all of a sudden, it starts to happen. Imagine what would happen if every university put 5% of its endowment I said, yeah, there is a perception now. That's why I said just write one on there, and they're not going to know the difference. But, yes, but the reason is that a lot of these HR departments, and a lot of the companies just assume, well, if you don't have a college degree, you must be some kind of complete idiot. Right? So it's like a screening process. We have to screen it down some way. It's not that a college degree actually prepares you for the job, or not that you actually learn anything in college that's relevant. It's just a way of screening the numbers because they get so many applicants. And so what I would think, and even if you're, what I would do is I would knock on the door. I would explain to someone, look, I don't have a college degree, so just pay me less. I didn't go to college, so pay me 20% less. Let me learn. Maybe, so that's the other way you can do it. You can just say, look, how much would you pay a college grad? $35,000. I'll do the job for 30. I mean, so you don't have the loans to pay. You can make yourself more attractive by working for less. You're still going to have more. Because you don't have this big. And once you're there, once you're in the door and you're good and you get a job, you can get a promotion. You can say, I've been here for a year. I'm working twice as hard as this college grad. You know what? I'm more productive. I want a raise. If I don't get a raise, I'm quitting. And you'll find ways around it. This is eventually going to happen. People are going to figure out that a college diploma is not worth the money. I mean, think about this girl that put $200,000. Think about what $200,000 is at present value. If you invested that, all the income over time, it's crazy. I mean, she's got to pay now, I think, $1,900 a month after tax. You can't even, here's the other crime. You can't even deduct the cost of a college education from the income that you earn, theoretically, because of that education. So it's even worse. You're paying an after tax. So let's say you get a job and you're earning $40,000 a year. Maybe what's that? $3,500 a month. After taxes, maybe you're left with $2,500 a month, Social Security, income taxes, and then out of that you pay your loans. There's no what's left over. You're much better off. I mean, as I said, unless you're going to be a doctor, if that's your goal, yeah, you got to go to college. I mean, I don't think you can get into med school. Why? When you went to college, probably good chance. But maybe a lawyer, stuff like that, or maybe you want to be an investment banker, you want to get an MBA or something. But for the vast majority of people, and now, certainly, if you can learn, if you're going to get an engineering or hard science, if you're majoring in computer science or physics or math, some of these things where you actually learn stuff, maybe. But most of the liberal arts, the history, the poli-sci, the philosophy, the sociology, whatever, all the stuff that ends in ology, all those courses, forget it. This is just, you're just spending time, right? You're partying, you're chasing girls, you're having a good fun, and at the end of it, you do that for 4 or 5 years, they give you a degree, right? And you take all these Mickey Mouse courses, and that's it. Yeah.
On the YouTube video, you had to fight the pundits on the other side viciously for about 2-3 years before the housing bubble came to pass. I don't know the time frame.
Yeah, I started going on the shows maybe in 05, 06, and so it took a few years before the whole thing collapsed.
All right. So now you're singing about the Bernanke bubble. Maybe that's the next one. What's the time frame?
Well, there's a government bubble. I talk about, if you go back and look at where all the cheap money, because bubbles come from credit, they come from money. And in the 1990s, the money went into stocks, NASDAQ stocks, internet stocks. That's where the bubble was. In the next bubble, the Fed place was in the housing market. And that's where all the cheap money went. It went into housing and consumption and things like that. Well, where is all the money going now that the Fed is creating? It's going into government, because the government has exploded in size. We have a government that's about twice as big as it was a decade ago. And it's spending all this money. In fact, if you look at Washington, D.C., the hottest real estate market in the country, in fact, the only place where real estate is appreciating is Washington, D.C., because all of our money is being sucked into Washington. And the salaries, look at now the gap. Look at the average government worker now makes twice the average private sector worker. So this is a huge bubble in government, and education is part of that, because most of the people working in education are working in government. They're part of this whole government bubble. And it is going to burst. But the problem with the government bubble is it's always, at least during the dot-com bubble or we got, Amazon, we got eBay, we got some decent companies. Yeah, we wasted some money, but in the end of the day, we got something out of it, right? It wasn't a complete waste. The internet is, I use it all the time. The housing bubble, we got a lot of nice houses. We overpaid for them, but they're there. The crazy thing is some people actually want to tear them down. To get there, they're there, let's use them. Yeah, stop building them. Let's not build anymore, but at least they're there. I mean, it's good that they're there, right? It's better than not having houses and having people having to live in the streets. And in fact, if we have a lot of houses, prices come down. It's a good thing because that means housing is cheaper. We want things to be cheaper. The problem with the government bubble is we're not getting anything that we want out of it. And the only people that benefit from the government bubble are the people in government. The rest of us are suffering because we have to bear the cost.
Hi, Peter. I'm a client and also a frequent caller on your show. I got two questions. The first one, I hear you talk a lot about gold and silver. That's purchasing power. You're not actually gaining purchasing power, it's just going up in nominal terms. My question is, if people who hold on to dollars are losing purchasing power, it's zero-sum game, right? No people who have business.
Right. Well, avoiding a loss is also as good as making a profit, right? But people are actually gaining some purchasing power because I think precious metals for years have been undervalued. So at some point they'll get fairly valued. But right now, I think if you look at the purchasing power, if someone had bought gold or silver, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they didn't just preserve their purchasing power, they have greatly enhanced it. In fact, if you look at the average price of a house